see so many people here. Thank you for coming. Well, today, this is our 9th year of One Book, One Community Read. It's been going on for 9 years. It seems like the time has passed quickly. All the books that we've seen are out there. This year's book is, if you lived here, you'd be here. Not you'd be here. If you lived here, you'd be home now, by Chris Ingraham. It's a wonderful selection as this theme of community and belonging are brought to us. And of course, there's some good laughs in the book. There are many collaborators that we want to mention before we continue for our program today. The One Book, One Community Committee, which meets every month to kind of review books and to read them and then proceed with putting together a program. The Hutch Connect Committee, the Hutchinson Health, the Hutchinson Leader, the Hutchinson Public Library. We also want to give thanks to the Village Shop and the Hutchinson Center for the Arts for making copies of the book available for purchase. We'd also like to extend a sincere thanks to the TV people at HCVM for filming this bit and live streaming this actually today. The One Book, One Community Reading Project is made possible thanks to funding from the Friends of the Library in Hutchinson and from Tri-Vent funding. And today's offer is made possible through a grant through the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Today's feature author, Chris Ingraham, was a data reporter for the Washington Post, and he lives in Red Lake Falls. He previously worked at the Brookings Institute and the Pew Research Center. Chris and his book have been featured nationally. In fact, some of you may have seen him on this Steve Hart CBS Evening News, On the Road. So now, with further delay, let me give you a warm welcome to Chris Ingraham.
Thanks for that welcome, and thanks so much to Hutchinson Connect for having me out here today. So this is my first real book event since the pandemic. So it's great to be going back out to Minnesota again. So technically I did one other event before this. Back in November, my wife and I did a talk with the Rural Educators Association, because she teaches high school now, which is something I'll be talking about. But we gave a talk. It was a conference of rural educators, and they were videotaping the talk and everything. And I only found out afterwards, when I watched the video, that I gave the entire talk, not only with half of my shirt untucked, but also with my fly down. I'm really thankful for the podium here today. Down here, you guys don't have to worry about it. So I'm Chris Ingraham, and so I was a data reporter for the Washington Post. I left the Post last June. There were a lot of different reasons. I was just kind of getting burnt out by journalism. It's been a tough couple of years with the election and the pandemic, so I just kind of needed to take a step back. So now I do similar work. I still do data reporting work, but I do it for my own independent newsletter called the Y-Axis, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. But yes, I no longer work for the Washington Post, but I still live in Minnesota, contrary to the guessing of many people when I first came out here. So we can say now that my relationship with Minnesota outlasted my relationship with the Washington Post, which I don't think anyone expected, certainly not me, when I first wrote that story. So I want to share a little bit with you just about that story, just how it all happened, how I ended up out here, and what some of my first impressions were of living in rural Minnesota, or I guess greater Minnesota. That's the proper term for it, right? That's what we say around here. You don't call it outstate, right? Like you don't call it outstate, right? But people in the cities do say that, though, right? They do say that. I've heard, because people up in Red Lake Falls get really riled up if they hear the term outstate. So outstate is bad, greater Minnesota is good. So these are some of the confusing cultural things I've had to navigate since coming
No home called this lesser Minnesota.
Yeah. So, believe it or not, I didn't actually set out to alienate the entire state of Minnesota. Fateful day in August 2015. That was one thing that brought, Greater Minnesota and the cities together. They all hated me for like 3 days in August that year. When I wrote the story that kind of started this whole fiasco. And so we're going on 7 years now. Man, it's a long time. It feels like a long time. But the story was called Every County in America Ranked by Scenery and Climate. And so to first understand why, like, Washington Post reporters even writing about this goofy stuff anyway, you kind of have to understand what DC is like in August. Because DC in August, it's a terrible place. It's like 95 degrees, it's 100% humidity, like everything smells like trash, it's just awful. And like you guys, like Minnesotans, I came out here, and I came on my first visit was out here some August, and I got out there and everyone was like, oh man, the humidity is so bad. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it was like 60% humidity or something. Another funny thing I've noticed is when we moved out here, like in the spring, as soon as the outside air temperature hits 70, all the air conditioning units in the neighborhood go on. Which is crazy to me. But so DC in August, the swamp, it's hot and sweaty, it's awful. And Congress is on recess, the whole city shuts down. Everybody's on vacation, except in the newsroom, whatever junior reporters and editors are stuck to kind of, handle the doldrums. And it's actually kind of a fun time to be in a newsroom because you get to just kind of write all sorts of weird, off-the-wall stories that you wouldn't get to write at other times in the year when there's actual real news to report on. So just for some context on this, some of the other groundbreaking pieces of journalism I wrote that August include: I wore shorts to the office and nothing will ever be the same. There was this controversy actually, and it was a perfect DC August controversy. Like people were complaining that office thermostats were set too low. And so women in offices were really cold, but they set them low to accommodate men in suits. And so you think about it, like, why are you wearing a thick, heavy wool suit in August? It's ridiculous. So this was my, attempt to try to promote office shorts. It didn't really take off, but I tried. This comes from another one of my stories. The story was entitled "Map: How Pancakes and Waffles Divide the Nation." And I basically mapped. You can get like a data set of like where all the Waffle Houses are and where all the IHOPs are. And then you map them and see like where's Waffle Country and where's Pancake Country. There's some interesting geographic divides. But again, this is not like the Pentagon Papers, right? Like this is the wrong one. This one too. Forget bears. Here's what really kills people at national parks. And the thing that stands out to me looking at these stories many years later is the little section tag above the headline, economic policy. Like, can you imagine, because this is the part of the paper I worked in, so this is just where all my stories ended up. Can you imagine like being a poor Senate Finance Committee staffer and opening up the Post business section to get the financial news of the day, and you see like bear attacks like the lead story? Like, so that was the environment that this all kind of came out of. And so in the midst of this doldrums, this kind of content desert that we were dealing with, I see a press release somewhere referencing this thing called the Natural Amenities Index. It was a data set. And I go check it out. And it turns out what happened is back in the early 2000s, researchers at the USDA, they were studying why people moved to and away from rural areas. And they thought that like the physical characteristics of places had something to do with this. And so what they basically did is ranked all 3,000 plus US counties on physical characteristics, things that make a place, which normal people think make an area a nice place to live. And it included things like, mild summers and mild winters and like lots of hills and valleys, lots of waters, the things that make places like nice places. And so I write this up, and I know I want to do a map on it, because like this is kind of like, this stuff is sort of like catnip for both reporters and readers, because everyone loves rankings, right? Like we were just talking about some goofy article that just got published a few months ago, like the ugliest town in Minnesota is like Glencoe or something. Right? Yeah, you all want to see it. I love it. Because it gets people riled up and it gets people happy when their town looks good. And so when you write something like this, like everyone wants to know who's number one and everyone wants to know who's dead last. So you kind of have to look this up and see where those places are. So the 6 categories: warm winter, winter sun, temperate summer, low summer humidity, topographic variation, and water area. And so looking at the map, the areas in brown are places that scored low on these measures, and areas in green are places that scored higher on these measures. You notice Minnesota, there's like a lot of brown there. And so what ended up happening is the bottom, like the ugliest place in America, according to this index, was this little place I'd never heard of called Red Lake County, Minnesota. Someplace in the northwest corner of the state. Now, I'd never been to Minnesota. I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about it. I will say, so your guys' county, which is McLeod County, right? Not McLeod, I call it McLeod. McLeod County. So I went home and looked it up. You guys are like, so out of like 3,000 counties, your rank's like 2,900 something. So like, you're well within the bottom 10%. So yeah, I'm sure I got some nasty emails from some of you guys too. So I'm looking up Red Lake County. I'm like, I know nothing about this place, but like I gotta find a little color, right? A little local color, see what their thing is. So I go to the county website and I'm like looking for, like fun facts or whatever, like their claim to fame, the ball of twine. You guys have a ball of twine, right? I did not know this either. This blew my mind. I found out about this. Like, if you guys had been bottom of the list, I could have just written about the ball of twine, and maybe I wouldn't even be here right now. Right? I went to their county website, and they have this like, and it's still the exact same website. They have this like dopey-looking old website. It was built in like 1987 with like, it's got a community calendar with literally nothing on it. But they had a fun facts page. I was like, aha, this is what I want. This is the color. This is the ball of twine, or the biggest like the walleye or whatever it is that they're famous for. And their fun fact was, and I quote, "It is the only landlocked county in the United States that is surrounded by just 2 neighboring counties." Fun. This is fun to the people of Northwest Minnesota. So, like, I'm starting to form a picture in my mind, like, okay, this is like podunk, right? Like, they don't even have a ball of twine like this. So, these people aren't going to read this story. They probably can't even read anyway. So, let them have a little bit. It doesn't matter. So I included that line and made fun of it. I mentioned Red Lake County, and I talked about, Minnesota. The Red River Valley is actually like the armpit of the nation, according to this data set, because all of those counties are on either side of the Red River there. And it's funny, in one of the interviews I did shortly after I moved here, it was a TV crew from Minneapolis, and they came up to the house and they were interviewing us about how life had changed and everything. And one of the things that they did was they made me recite that paragraph making fun of Red Lake County on camera. And they like got the camera and like got real up close in my face, like one of those like perp walk kind of things, like your dog's been bad and you're rubbing his nose in it. Well, that's what they did to me with this passage. But so I ended up publishing this thing that, so Red Lake County was at the bottom, and like number 1 was like, I don't know, Santa Monica or something like that, Southern California. They got the oceans and the hills and it's mild weather and whatever. So I make the map, I write it up, send it off, and basically, don't really give it a second thought, because I've done stuff like this all the time. But the interesting thing was that, so I published, it goes up on a Monday morning, so I published at like, 8:30ish on Monday, and by 8:35, the hate mail is rolling in. And like, I get an email from our web analytics people. They're like, we got a lot of people from Minnesota coming to the website all of a sudden, and they're going to one of your articles. I was like, well, let's go see what this is about. And sure enough, it was about this story. And there was just like this rapid mobilization of Minnesota people on the internet pushing back against the claim that any part of their state could be ugly at all, and much less that the ugliest place in America could be located anywhere within their borders. And so it just kind of snowballed, and they're just, like I said, it's August, there's not a lot going on, so the regional and local papers are picking up on it, Star Tribune writes about it, your local politicians got in on it. Franken was kind enough to tag the main account just so all my bosses knew that I was getting people in the upper Midwest riled up, and One of my favorite stories, the Star Tribune did one, and they actually called the county commissioners in Red Lake County to get a reaction from them. And the direct quote from them, from County Commissioner Chuck Simpson, was, "He can kiss my butt." Which is kind of like the tenure of the responses to the story. So this is all kind of surprising to me, right? Because like I like as a data reporter, I did this kind of thing all the time, like county rankings, and you're writing about economic data or social data or crime or whatever. And there's always places at the top and always places at the bottom, and like you always call them out. And even writing about like really controversial stuff like guns and drugs and whatnot, I never got anything like the feedback I got from Minnesota folks. And as an aside, do you know that there's a saying among statisticians, "Thank God for Alabama"? Did you know this? Yeah, some of you guys know. The idea is that no matter how bad your state or another state may be doing on some ranking of anything like literacy or education, Alabama is always worse. So I've trash talked Alabama more times than I can remember in my career. Never a peep from people in Alabama. One of the other interesting things. If you look at this map, there's a lot of brown, right? Like it's not just Minnesota, like all over the upper Midwest, Ohio, Wisconsin, basically just the flat places, flatland or flyover country, whatever you want to call it. The interesting thing is I didn't hear a single word of complaint from anybody in any other state, not even the people in like Grand Forks or Fargo. I did actually get an email from a guy in Nebraska. I think he was in Omaha. Which Omaha looked terrible too. And he was like, I was really upset when I read this story at first, but then I kind of thought about it. And I was like, you know what, you're right, Omaha really is kind of a dump, so. And I think part of it is, so one thing that I have learned since coming out here is that Minnesotans are insane when it comes to rankings. Like you guys might not realize this about yourself, but like Minnesota tends to do really well on all sorts of like quality of life and good living kind of things, and you guys know it too. Like I did this event in the cities shortly after I got here, just kind of a similar presentation. And it was some kind of, one of those kind of social community groups, just kind of making the city better kind of places. And it was their annual conference. And the very first thing they did, just to kick off their conference, was to go through this list of rankings that Minneapolis had placed either number 1 or number 2 in. Like there's a knowledge and an appreciation for the good quality of life you have out here. So I think that's kind of part of what happened. So given the feedback, I did a follow-up story and kind of compiled all the feedback into kind of a funny follow-up story and kind of eating some crow for it. I asked one of the guys on Twitter who wrote to me, like, okay, so if Minnesota isn't the worst place in the nation, what actually is? And he told me I wouldn't be doing my job as a born and bred Minnesotan if I didn't tell people to avoid Wisconsin. Kind of helped me start to understand the Midwestern rivalries. Minnesota and Wisconsin, they're like the two nearby towns that hate each other even though they're the exact same, right? Like small town high school football rivalries. So, the social media shaming, it continues unabated. But a couple days after that, I get an email from a guy named Jason Brumwell, a guy who lives in Red Lake Falls. And it's an invitation to come visit Red Lake County. And he and his family own and run a tubing business there. And he was kind of having some fun with the story. He's like, you should really come out here and visit. We'd love to show you around, show you the places really like. And so the first thing I do is I Google Jason to make sure he's not a serial killer or anything like that. Like he's a normal person. They do have email out there apparently. Okay. But he writes to me. He was very apologetic about the feedback that I received from other people. He was like, oh, some other people wrote you some really nasty stuff. But the nastiest thing I got was basically just a stern I disagree. So that's Minnesotan nastiness. So I was kind of struck by this because, as a national reporter, you get a lot of really nasty comments day in, day out. So I'm kind of interested in doing this. And so I tell my wife, hey, so there's this guy, and she's been kind of following the story, making fun of me too. There's this guy who owns a business out there, and he actually wants me to come visit and see the place. And I think that's kind of cool. I think I might actually do that. And she's like, it's a trap. They're gonna kill you. They're gonna like, it'll be like the Wicker Man or something. Whatever they do out there to outsiders, who even knows? Don't do it. But I bring it up to my editor, and he's like, yeah, why don't you do that? Really suspiciously enthusiastic, I think, because he's thinking if, like, Washington Post reporter gets murdered by a polite Midwestern mob, that's a story, right? He's okay to have me take one for the team for that. And so, long story short, about a week after writing the story, I'm on a flight to Grand Forks, North Dakota, and then I'm driving through the countryside to get to Red Lake Falls. And it's funny thinking about that day now, because since then, I've driven on that road so many times since then, but that was kind of my first impression of it. And I just kept wanting to stop and soak everything in, because everything was just so flat and so wide open. And I thought growing up on the East Coast, I thought flat was bad and boring, but I didn't have an appreciation for the sky and just the sight of the fields and everything. It was it made an impression on me. So I'm driving, and I finally get into Red Lake Falls, and I pull up to the county courthouse, not really knowing what to expect, right? I figure a couple of yokels standing around ready to do whatever. But I get out of the car, and there's 50 news crews there, right? And there is, I kid you not, there is a marching band. On the steps of the courthouse, I'm striking up a tune as I get there. It was madness. It was like something straight out of Norman Rockwell, right? Totally not what I expected. And so in the next couple days, they kind of just Jason and some of the other folks from the communities in the county, they kind of drove me around and got to meet a lot of people. And it was a lot of fun. And while I was out there talking to people, I was struck by a number of things. And the first was the overwhelming sense of pride that they had in their community. And you guys, I'm pretty sure, a lot of people out here, you take that for granted. Just oh yeah, of course people are proud of their communities. But that was a new thing for me. I grew up in upstate New York, in a small town called Oneonta, Iowa, which has about a similar amount of people as you guys do here. And the thing about upstate New Yorkers is that nobody really likes upstate New York, and especially not the people who live there. If somebody had written an article saying that Otsego County, where I grew up, was the worst place in America, they wouldn't care. They just wouldn't, they would not disagree. And there just wasn't, so that says that of people really wanting to show an outsider what this place was like. That was new for me. And I was struck by the sense of community spirit and togetherness. Over and over, I had heard stories about how when people in the region needed to get something done, they just kind of got together and did it, right? Red Lake Falls needs a pool, you hold a fundraiser, and you put the money together and build it. School kids need snowshoes, put some money together and buy snowshoes for the kids. And again, I had never really observed this kind of thing in the small towns I grew up in upstate New York, and certainly not in places like DC and Baltimore, where it's just kind of big city and you don't really have that. That's not the way things work there. And the last thing was, and this was what surprised me the most, was the landscape. I was really struck with the landscape. Living on the East Coast, you're just kind of tucked in among hills and valleys everywhere, right? So you don't really get these big vistas of the sky. You don't get these, just kind of these broad fields that are kind of, like the ocean in a way, right? The grain and everything. It's very kind of soothing to just look out on. And one thing I found out afterwards, this index, they counted water area, right? Water area as a natural amenity. Interesting thing about Red Lake County, it is one of the only counties in Minnesota that does not have any lakes. But they do have rivers, and the rivers are the defining characteristic of that place geographically, because there's these beautiful bluffs there, and these rivers going through, and it's where the economic stuff has come from traditionally. But the weird thing was this data set, a blank spot in the data set, it didn't include rivers, because just because of the way that census data tracks rivers, it's not something that has an area, it's just a point or a line, so it's not a thing you could do a calculation on. So the data set was by definition blind to like the one thing that made Red Lake County special in that region. So I kind of drank in everything the county had to offer for a few days, and I left and went home, and I wrote a follow-up story, just kind of detailing the trip and whatnot. But like for weeks afterwards, I couldn't stop thinking about the place, and I was having these dreams about it, and dreaming about conversations with people I met there. One of the funny things that happened up there, so I got there that day and went to the courthouse, and like that first day we drove around and met a whole bunch of people. Finally, at the end of the day, I get back to my motel room. It's a hotel / liquor store in town. So I go back to my motel room, and I check my phone, and I've got like 400 Facebook notifications. I'm like, what is this? And I open it up, and like literally every single person I talked to had sent me a friend request. Dozens of people I hadn't talked to. I'm like, wow, these are really friendly, open people. And I've since found out that like Facebook is where things happen up there, right? Like it's probably similar here, like in the small towns, especially when like the papers aren't coming out every day. Like everything is happening on Facebook. That's where the gossip happens, and if something's on Facebook, it's serious. So this was kind of happening at an interesting time in our lives. We had shortly before I went to the Post, we had twin boys, Jack and Charlie. So that's them when they were babies. They were 2 at this time, I think. And we were living in a 900 square foot row house in Baltimore County. So family of 4, 900 square feet. It's spread across 4 stories, right? So it's like each story was like literally like just this, like literally just that. And it's all stairs, so it's like a toddler death trap, right? It's all stairs. The kids are going to kill themselves trying to get around the place. So the house was too small. We needed to move. Compounding things, we were both working too hard, right? Like I was working for the Post. I was commuting 3 hours every single day, hour and a half out there, hour and a half back. And it was drive the car to the train station, take the train to the metro station, take the metro to the neighborhood, and then walk to the Post. And like 4 different connections, and at any single one of those places, if something goes wrong, that blows up your entire morning or your entire afternoon. There were times I left the office at like 5 and didn't get back till 10:30 or 11, just because something went wrong. It happened all the time. And my wife too, she didn't have a long commute. She was working for Social Security, whose headquarters were up in Baltimore, but it was a high-powered policy job with the government, long hours, and we basically didn't get to see the kids at all during the work week. And we would get home at the end of the day and you just have nothing left in the tank, right? Like you're just done, you don't have any energy or patience for the kids or for each other or for yourselves. And we knew this wasn't how we wanted to live. So around this time we were talking about serious changes. Get a bigger house, maybe one of us take a few years off of work to be with kids. But the problem was this was all 100% completely financially undoable in the DC area. Like the cost of living was just so high. Single-family homes were like, and this is in Baltimore, this isn't even in DC. Single-family homes were like $750,000 and up. And it's like, are you people all investment bankers? Like, how do people afford to live here? And even if we moved into an affordable single-family house, we still have the commutes to deal with. And so we started thinking about remote work. And that was kind of when the light bulb went off. I was like, okay, wait a minute. So my stories have been brought a lot of readers to the Post. So I had a fair amount of leeway with my editors. So we're kind of like kicking this around one night. My mom is actually up visiting from Tampa this night, and we're all like a couple of glasses of wine into it, right? We're just talking through it or whatever. And my mom, of all people, she's the first one to say, and we're kind of like Bree and I are complaining about all these things and how much it sucks. But my mom, she says, well, why don't you guys move out to that nice little town you visited over the summer? And that was my reaction too, like kind of like, what a crazy thing to do. But we slept on it, and like, soon an idea started taking root, and then like you start thinking through all the ways it makes sense. Like the cost of living is lower, so we could afford to live in like a regular single-family home like we always wanted. And we could, only one of us would have to work out there, so we'd be able to spend more time with the kids. I wouldn't have to commute. And basically what happened is eventually we kind of talked ourselves into a place where it would have been financially irresponsible of us to not move to Red Lake County, Minnesota. Now, Brianna was a bit of a hard sell at first. The thing about my wife, she spent part of her childhood in Arizona, so she really doesn't like the cold. Minnesota. I was like, don't worry, it wasn't cold when I was there. She's like, it's like in January. I'm like, it's probably not that bad. And it took some convincing, but then she was like, okay, she likes the water, right? So she's like, all right, Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes. There's got to be lakes there, right? I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, definitely. There's got to be. I took her to one of the only counties in the state with no freaking lakes. She was so mad when she found that out. But I had already got her committed at that point, so it was too late to back out. So we run this up the flagpole at work, and surprisingly, they went for it. They're like, okay, yeah, you'll work remotely and just keep doing what you do. Because my job, it's like 99% phone and internet, right? Like it wasn't on Capitol Hill every day. I didn't have to be in a specific place. I'm just doing data and internet stuff. And I could do that out there, and they do have internet out there. That was like the first thing all my colleagues asked me, like, do they have internet out there? I'm like, yes, they have internet out there. So we ended up buying a house right in town of Red Lake Falls. So this is a picture that the Star Tribune took. They wanted to do like American Gothic kind of thing. But the house, like when we went out in like March to kind of look around at houses, and this house was kind of notorious. Everyone referred to it as the Provo House. And that's how they talked about it to us beforehand. It's like, oh, it's a purple house. Well, a purple house is for sale. You can live there if you want. And we go up to it. It's kind of like this grayish purple. It's not as outlandish as everyone made it seem, but that kind of gave me a sense of like how unconformity is viewed out there. This house is a little bit on the purple side of gray and purple. We don't like that. The house still is purple, by the way. People don't ask me about that. We're just too lazy and cheap to paint, so it's cool. It's fine. We drove around to a bunch of different places, looking for places to live. A place I really liked, they were showing us a place kind of out in the country. And it was like one of those places where you like drive down the paved road and you drive off the paved road and then you drive to the dirt road and then whatever less than dirt road is. It's like all these like subcategories of terrible roads. And then we got to the house, it was awesome. It's like this kind of in this beautiful, secluded, wooded setting. And we're looking around the house and talking to people who live there. And I notice there's like a rifle standing just like by a fridge, like leaning up against the fridge. And I'm like, what's that for? And the people were like, oh, well, there's this bear that comes around sometimes. He's cool. We call him Brutus. He's fine. But every once in a while, we kind of have to remind him who's boss. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And Brianna looks at me. She's like maybe that's like advanced Minnesota living, and we weren't ready for that. We got something a little more reasonable in town. One of the things that really struck me about moving out here was just how much interest there was in the story from all over the world. And that's part of why I ended up writing the book. But like the story got picked up by news outlets all over the country, and like Canada, and France, New Zealand. Like it's crazy, and I kind of racked my mind trying to figure out why that was. Like it's kind of a quirky town, like call a place a hellhole and then move there. Like I see the appeal in that, but it didn't explain like the international interest in everything. And I think part of it is that, and I'm sure some of you guys know about this too, because for among a lot of folks who live in cities or suburbs, a lot of people have this kind of desire to get back to a small town or a rural setting. Like everyone who's lived and worked in a city has had one of those terrible days where like the traffic's bad, and like your boss is bad, and just like everything about city life is great. And you had that fantasy of like, God, I wish I could just go, live in the country and like chop wood and like have like 6 dogs or whatever. Like everyone who lives in cities have that fantasy. So there's a lot this is kind of like that, a sort of wish fulfillment of that kind of urge. And I did hear from a lot of people all over the country who were like, oh man, I've always kind of wanted to do something like that, but I just never had the chance, or it never worked out, or I'd be worried about finding work. And that gets another thing that I've been kind of thinking lot about. It's something that you guys probably deal with too. And of course now with the pandemic, right? Like everything's all kind of blown out of the water. But a lot of the issues that they have in rural areas is kind of like shrinking population and not enough tax base, and there's that kind of familiar story of rural decline, right? And a lot of that's driven by not having enough people, right? The people are leaving. And then conversely, you think of cities and the problems they have in cities and things like the sprawl and the long commutes and the failing infrastructure. And a lot of that, it's a function of having too many people, or at least of not having the proper infrastructure to deal with, not having the right housing and the right transportation to deal with your people. And so we've got all these people, we've got one set of communities where problems are being caused by too few people, and another set of communities where problems are being caused by too many people. And like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And having everybody in cities, that made sense for a long time, right? You need people in close proximity to each other to share ideas and generate economic activity. But in this day and age, and especially in the post-pandemic era, we found out that for a lot of jobs, you don't need all those people in the same office, right? Like you don't need those face-to-face meetings 3-4 times a day. And at some point, I think the economic benefits of having lots of people physically together, they get overshadowed by things like high cost and sprawl and long commutes. Like what good is, the boost in productivity of having people at the office if like your workers are out sick all the time because they're not able to exercise or take care of themselves? Or, what good comes to a company when city housing prices are so high that most of your workers are commuting an hour, 2 hours or more to get to work? When on my commute, one morning, I'm not really much of a people person, so I tended to try to avoid people when I was commuting. But I ended up sitting next to this dude one morning, and I saw him, and it's like 7:30 in the morning, and I see him just pull out a flask and open it up. Like, wow, rough day at work? He's like, no, this is just what I do. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I started talking to him. It turned out, so his commute, he lived north of Baltimore. So he had to drive all the way into Baltimore and then take the train all the way down into DC and then take another train all the way back up around the other side to get to work. So his commute was 3 hours one way, 6 hours a day, every single day. So that's kind of what we're doing to ourselves in a lot of cities, and as housing becomes more and more expensive, right, that becomes a bigger problem because people move farther and farther out. And so, I hope if this, the pandemic does anything, I assume we're going to see telework become more common just in normal contexts, and I really hope it does. I calculated at one point the amount of time I spent commuting, and I think it was something like literally like more than 1 full month of a year, like 1 full month of 24 hours a day, like more than 1/12 of my entire life was spent commuting. It's just a tremendous waste. And places like Northwest Minnesota and like Hutchinson, you guys are perfectly positioned to capitalize on this, especially you guys here being as close as you are to Minneapolis. And the thing you have to understand is that people want to come to communities like this. They want what you guys have. When shortly after I moved out here, I did a bunch of presentations at like small towns and whatnot, and people come up to me and be like, and then they have that rural decline there in the back. They're like, nobody wants to live here. People are just moving away. We don't know how to attract people. And I'm like, you don't have to attract people. They want what you have. You have to show them that it's possible and that it can happen. There's polling. It's something like if you look at where Americans say they want to live, over half, 54%, said they would prefer to live in a small town or a rural area. But just fewer than 20% of the population that ever lives there. So you have this huge mismatch, right? You have 80% of people living in cities and big suburbs, and like something like half of them, they want out. So there's huge demand. It's just a question of making it a reality for their employers and for them. So for a long time, it's just been seen as this intractable problem. But the pandemic now has kind of blown it up, and it was kind of wild living in small town Minnesota during the pandemic. just because, you know, a combination of the pandemic and the election year, like, just really melted a lot of people's minds. Like, in the book, I talk about how, you know, during 2016, politics wasn't really a big thing, right? Like, there weren't a lot of campaign signs, Trump signs, or Clinton signs, or whatever. 2020 was totally different. Like, all that kind of national nastiness had worked its way into the community, and it was really unfortunate to see. But it's starting to kind of to dissipate now, so it's gotten a little better. But you know, these problems they've been seen as attractive for so long. You know, jobs versus housing, and I think just with a little bit more creative thinking and telework, you know, we can really solve it. I mean, it's just like, we're such a huge country, right? Like, this country is just enormous land-wise. And it's kind of insane that we have like one of the largest countries on earth. We've got everybody trying to live in like the same 5 or 6 metro areas, right? And so as I wrote, and one of the things that really kind of moving to a place like Red Lake County impressed upon me is you kind of have to get out of the cities and go to a place as small as Red Lake County to appreciate how big this country really is and how much space and room is here. So that's kind of the meat of my talk. I will kind of, I'll open up for questions in a few minutes, but kind of an epitaph. So we're still here, right? Like, so we just went through our, so let's see. Okay, no, we survived our 6th winter. So we've been through the 6th Minnesota. My wife, and she just complains up and down. And to get her out here, I just had to say, okay, like, it's gonna be cold, but you are allowed to buy whatever warm, soft, cuddly things you need to like keep yourself warm. And I knew that she was going native our first spring here. Actually, no, it was towards the end of the first winter. And it was like, we'd have one of those stretches where it's just like below 0 for like 2 weeks in a row. And one day the sun was out and she went outside and she's like, oh man, it's really nice out. We should get outside and do something. And I looked at the thermometer and I'm like, you know it's 15 degrees, right? And you know that like Maryland Brianna would look at Brianna now saying this and think you were insane. So you are becoming Minnesota. One of the other things that we were able to do here that never would have been a possibility even just on our radar out there is we were able to have another kid. This little guy there, William, he's 4 now, and his brothers are 8. But like, you know, living in Baltimore where everything was so unaffordable, we just never would have been able to have another child. It just, the thought didn't occur to us until we got out here and we had that space and we just had the room for the family to kind of expand. And so, you know, you talk about like the benefits and things that change. And like, so I try to imagine people like, are you going back to DC or what would it be like if you're DC right now? Like, I don't know, like we wouldn't have William. So like, I can't even, you know, I can't comprehend that. I can't do that math. William is a native-born Minnesotan through and through. The other day he was, I was looking for him. He was playing outside apparently, and this was like last week. So the snow started to melt. So we still got like big piles of snow everywhere up there, and like so the temperature, it was like 34 degrees, big piles of snow, but there were like puddles from all the melt and everything. And I go look for William, and he's outside, and what he had been doing is he had gotten all of his pool toys out of the shed from the summer, and he had taken them over to a puddle, and he was like filling buckets up with water and then dumping them down the little slide in our yard and calling it his water slide. And it's 34 degrees, and there's like, he's like, you know, he's like making snowballs too, and he's soaking wet. And I go on the porch, I'm like, William, are you warm enough? He's like, yeah. Can I put my bathing suit on? You definitely did not grow up. So I think I'm going to pause it there, and at this point, I'd like to open up to questions from you guys about literally anything you're curious about, our experience there. I talk a lot about our experience there in the book, but anything you guys might want to know, fire away.
Grab the microphone.
Oh, yeah. If it doesn't work, you can just shout.
Has your mother been up to Minnesota, and if so, what does she think about it?
she likes it a lot. So we tried to get her to move up here so many times. The problem is, so she lives outside of Tampa, and my stepdad, like he grew up in upstate New York, so he's like, I did the winter thing. I'm done with winter. I'm never doing another winter in my entire life. So he wants nothing to do with up here. But they come up and visit. She's actually coming up in May, so it'd be nice to have her up again. I will say, people also ask me like, so has anybody else like been inspired by you to move to Red Lake Falls? And my answer is always no. But I will say, my brother, he got married shortly after he moved here, and him and his wife did their honeymoon out in Red Lake Falls in January. Probably the first Red Lake Falls honeymoon on record. Now, unfortunately, I probably wouldn't recommend it because they did end up getting divorced a couple years later. Not because of Red Lake Falls, or, correlation, causation, not that kind of thing, but kind of a mixed track record so far of getting other people.
I read in your book that you've been very happy with the education that your kids have gotten here. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of small town school feeling, that was one of the big draws for us. And it's great, it's perfect for them. And one of the things that happened, the only kind of time that we were like, oh, maybe like this isn't gonna work and maybe we're gonna have to move back, is that not long after we moved, one of the twins, Charlie, was diagnosed with autism. And we were kind of like, oh man, like are they gonna have the services he needs here and whatnot? So we did a bunch of tests, went to a bunch of doctors. We actually ended up, because we were heading back to DC to visit friends anyway, we took them out to Johns Hopkins there where they have a really good autism clinic. And they did some screenings and they just sat down with us afterwards and we were like, so what does Charlie need at this point? And they're like, honestly, the ideal situation would be like small schools, small classrooms where kind of everybody knows who he is. And he's not going to get lost in the shuffle of crowd, not be overwhelmed. They're like, but that's kind of a hard thing to come by these days. And we're like, well. But no, we are like hardcore pro small town public education family now because Brianna just took a job. She went back to work and she's teaching English at Red Lake Falls High School now. So this was her first year teaching English for them. So yeah, we love the schools there. There was actually. Maybe a year or two ago, there was a big referendum in town. The elementary school wanted to do an expansion. And it was on an off year and everything. People were concerned, but ultimately people voted to raise taxes on themselves to support the school. And we've seen over and over again just a lot of support from the community. People get that education is important, get that not only is a good school good for the kids, but it's good for the community too. So there's real understanding of that. You don't see that in a lot of places, I don't think. Anyone else?
What do you miss most from the East Coast versus
The
what
food.
do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I gotta be careful because I still get in trouble with this kind of stuff, but so I am aware that there's perfectly good food in Minneapolis. It's good. I know Minneapolis has good food. They're like a big city, right? They got all the foods. I actually had dinner last night at Flame Steakhouse. Really good. It was awesome. I think my food problems are more like a Northwest Minnesota food problem because up there there's like bar food and bar food and that's it. Right? It's great if you want like bar food, but if you want anything else, you're kind of out of luck. When we first got out here, I noticed that everybody up there drank their coffee black, and I was kind of impressed. Like, these are like tough Upper Midwestern farmers drinking their coffee black or whatever. And then I realized it's because their coffee tastes like water. It's like coffee flavored tea, basically. I'm like, oh, that's why you guys drink it black. If you put a drop of half and half, it would look like dishwater. So, I miss the food. I kind of miss, the newsroom kind of collaborative newsroom environment. But like I said, my relationship with Minnesota has outlasted my relationship with Post. So last summer, I started kind of an independent newsletter, doing things similar to what I did for the Post, just kind of all things data, interesting offbeat stories. It's called the Y-axis. You see, it's like a pun on like the Y-axis with charts because we're explaining things with charts. Pretty cool. The address is there. It's the y-axis.substack.com. And so I do kind of fun data stuff. I I did a big investigation recently. I was in the grocery store, right? And I was trying to buy toilet paper. And you know how when you're buying toilet paper, there's all these crazy conversions you have to do, like 12 regular rolls equal 47.5 rolls, right? And the conversions are all different, and it makes no sense. So I was like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this. So I bought a whole bunch of different kinds, and calculated on a per white basis, which is that's the invariable. They don't tell you how many whites you get with the squares. So I learned a whole bunch of stuff, and I figured out what exactly the best bag, buck for your wife or whatever is in terms of toilet paper. So we do fun stuff like that. But I would have had a harder time running at the Post. You know, the snooty New York Times will never run an expose into the cost per white for toilet paper. That's what we do.
How do you sign up for that?
Oh, you can just go to the website, the ymss.substack.com.
Can you tell me more about the climate of leaving the Washington Post and then going to Substack, like your journalism in general? The trend from
How much time
the
do you
Post to
have?
the Substack.
Give me a few drinks and I'll start ranting. No, it was time. Through many years of Post, and especially through the Trump era, there was legit burnout. There was just legit burnout. I needed to do something else. But partially, I think the press just really whiffed a lot of things in the Trump era, and they didn't do a great job. And a lot of it, and I saw firsthand, it was the folks in power trying to just pretend like it was maybe the 1980s or the 1990s still, and things weren't that nasty, and that there's this consensus out there that everybody can come to, and they just, to my mind, weren't grappling with the realities of the political environment, the polarization. I feel like we spent just so much time catering to our worst faith critics, just bending over backwards to cater to people who were going to hate the media regardless. And it was really frustrating to work in that kind of environment, and with my politics, because I'm a fairly progressive guy, but I couldn't be honest about that with my readers. And the whole thing that a lot of mainstream organizations do, they know that they can't force you to be unbiased, right? Because we're human, right? We have biases. We have things we like and we don't like. But their approach to that is to hide that bias and pretend that it doesn't exist. And to just not say, the way political reporters talk about their stories to themselves versus the way they write those stories, it's totally different. It's completely different. And it's borderline misleading, I think, because reporters are not telling people what they are actually seeing happen. And the thing is, the bias soaks through anyway. People understand that, you go to a paper like the Post or the Times because it has a certain kind of point of view, a certain worldview, and you like that. And, when you're writing a story, your bias creeps in everything from the stories you choose, to the people you choose to interview, to the types of questions you pose, and how you ask those questions. It's just everywhere. And I think the industry needs to be a lot more frank about that. And you don't want an industry full of opinion writers, but I think we need to be more frank and more kind of realistic about the environment we're working in. And so that was kind of part of my underlying frustration, that I just need to go do my own thing for a while. Sorry, not to do the whole meeting at 22 like you guys.
First, if we could give a big thank you to Hutchinson Connects for sponsoring this event. I think this is awesome. I'm a huge supporter of people looking out for each other, and growing up on the East Coast, I know what you mean about Minnesota, especially small towns, being a world of difference. Could you share the sad episode with your neighbor that contributed to your decision to move to Minnesota?
Absolutely, yeah. This story always...
And maybe that will inspire people.
Yeah, no, this story always horrifies people from Minnesota. So when we were we were living in Baltimore, we were living in kind of like a row house situation, sort of like condos, with a bunch of houses sharing walls. But we really didn't know that, we lived next door, shared walls, and we heard what we were doing every day, but we really didn't talk to or interact much with our neighbors. And at one point, one of our neighbors just kind of disappeared for a while. He was, he was kind of a weird guy, kept to himself or whatever. He just kind of disappeared. Nobody saw him. And, a couple of weeks went by, and his mom ended up going to the house to see what was up with him. And it was his birthday, too, so she, brought him a birthday present. But she couldn't get in, and she noticed that the door was locked, and, something didn't smell right. And she ended up having to call the cops, and what it turned out is he had passed away 2 weeks prior, and just nobody knew. Nobody, and it wasn't the kind of place where, you walk over and say hi or knock on the door if somebody's, not there when you expect it. So that was kind of, and I told that to people in Red Lake Falls, and they're like, man, we could, that just wouldn't happen. How does that even happen? How do you not, just talk and hang out with your neighbors all the time? So it was a big, big cultural difference, for sure.
I like what you had to say about how hard it was to go back to raising your own children. I'm wondering when your next book is about that and finding humor in the hard work of raising your own kids.
Yeah, well, I'll have time for that when they move out of the house. No, I don't know, man, but yeah, it's tough. There are days when I'm like, man, I wish I was on that train. I wish there was a storm or something, so I was just stuck on the train till 11 and I didn't have to deal with any of this nonsense. But no, it's tough. Raising kids is tough, and I wish that's something that we as a society had a little bit more kind of acknowledgement of, because it's just hard for anyone in any situation. And our situation back then and now, it's relatively easy, but still, it just takes everything out of you. And you guys, anybody who's a parent here knows this. It's just really ridiculously hard. So yeah, no, I don't know if I'm. No other books planned at the moment, but there might be in the future. Yeah.
How long does it take to write a book like you wrote?
Oh my God, it took forever. So I'm used to thinking in 600 to 800 word, chunks of writing, right? And so sitting down to focus for 200 some odd pages, it was like pulling teeth sometimes. A lot of writers, they'll be like, you really have to love writing, and you have to it just has to flow out of you, man, and it just has to feel the flow, and you gotta love what you do. Me, I hate writing. I hate writing so much. I hate the process of writing. It's the worst. Work is drudgery. You're just filled with self-doubt all the time. So one thing I always tell young writers, it's okay if you don't love it and it doesn't come easily. It's okay to hate it if what you're doing is what you believe, if you believe in it, it's important. And most writers, the other thing a lot of writers won't tell you is that every single writer, and this is especially true of media people, they love attention. And so even if you hate writing, the writing is the bad thing you have to do to get the good thing, which is the attention. So that is how, my processes work. But. Yes?
One of the things I really enjoy is your curiosity. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the influences that enabled you to have such curiosity and ask questions and be interested all around you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was partly growing up. My dad was a veterinarian and my mom was a vet tech. So we were very into natural things, right? And so we always had tons of animals in the house. And we were always hiking and looking under rocks for salamanders and things like that. So there was that kind of, almost kind of like a scientific, I guess, mindset that my parents instilled in me growing up. So I think that's where a lot of it came from. But yeah, I don't know. I just, I like things. I tell people on dad recorder, they're like, oh, dad. But no, there's really interesting, weird stuff you can do with that, right? That's a lot of fun. And I love those really weird, kind of off the wall data sets, like the Natural Amenities Index. For the Y-axis a couple months ago, I found out, that there is data that's been collected on what color of cats are the friendliest. Do you know this? Turns out orange cats. Orange cats are the friendliest. Yeah, everybody knows orange cats. Oh, yeah, of course orange cats. Yeah, it's a thing. Orange cat energy is a thing. And there's got a whole chapter about orange cats in the book, actually. We have 2 orange cats now. It's great. But yeah, there's just and there's anything that you're curious about, you can probably find some like data on it that will give you some context. And the data might be like, it might be bad or it might not be that useful, but it will give you some context that can kind of spur more questions.